I'm gonna go that right into the question.
Sure.
So, what is Nichiren Shu, and what is the core teaching of Nichiren Shu? Please tell us.
So Nichiren Shu is a really fascinating idea, because a lot of times this is where a lot of misunderstanding happens. Nichiren Shu is, of course, the historical branch. I call it the historical branch of Nichiren Buddhism because it's based on the historical places and historical, actual physical teachings and manuscripts of Nichiren Shonin in the form of his letters. That's what they base everything on. So some schools base it on letters and that have not been verified. But Nichiren Shu specifically goes on verifiable information. That's one of the main differences. And also it's important to know Nichiren Shu has a wide variety of different traditions. So Nichiren Shonin himself had 6 different disciples of all different characters and different backgrounds and different ideas. So ultimately, when he passed away, in which Nichiren Shonin did not pick a specific successor, they all were his successors, just like we are. And they all went and taught and did and expounded the Buddhism and Nichiren Buddhism in their own way. Hence, we have now so many different lineages and traditions. And Nichiren Shu is seen like as an umbrella, that the umbrella is actually the established tradition of Nichiren Buddhism. So the majority of Nichiren groups fall under Nichiren Shu, which is based on some very specific and simple concepts in which they all agree. There are some smaller sects that are outside of it because they don't fall into this category, or they have a totally different belief system, which is not based on this historical concept. So the first one is that they base their life, the foundation of Nichiren Shu Buddhism is based on the example of the Lotus Sutra as personally experienced by Nichiren Shonin. So specifically, the life experience and the manifestation of the Lotus Sutra by Nichiren Shonin's life, which is what makes him so important, is the main precept of Nichiren Shu Buddhism specifically. The second is that we put our faith in the eternal Buddha, Shakyamuni, who is the true teacher of wisdom and compassion for all beings. So as we go into the part about the Lotus Sutra, the eternal Buddha is the Buddha of chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra, in which is expounded and taught that the Buddha existed since time immemorial, and that Buddha nature has always existed and is the potential found in all beings. And also, which we'll talk about later, the true concept, the true thinking of the Buddha, which he reveals in the Lotus Sutra. And 3, we train ourselves to attain Buddhahood by upholding Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, both in action and spirit. So the main concept of upholding, when we say Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, we mean the great title, but we also mean upholding the Lotus Sutra specifically. And that is really interesting because within Nichiren Shu, there are some variables of which parts of the sutra people uphold. And the last one, the next one is our teacher Nichiren Shonin, who vowed to cultivate Buddha nature of all people and create the land of the Buddha world. So that means this world is the eternal Buddha land. That's what we believe, as expounded in the Lotus Sutra, that this world is the place of Buddhist practice. And that was one of Nichiren Shonin's main concepts, is that what made Nichiren Shonin so interesting was that his life was 100%, not 99.1%, 100% based on the Lotus Sutra and the practice of that. And then number 5, we are the Buddha's children, and we will live together peacefully with all people in our search for the truth. It's interesting because a lot of times people think Nichiren Buddhist and are scared of Nichiren Buddhist. I study and practice and with many other teachers. You talk to Meido Sensei, one of my very good friends, who's a Rinzai priest. And it's fascinating to see how scary people, many people, especially some Japanese, are scared of Nichiren Buddhists as like these kind of extremists. And of course, like any tradition, we've had our extremists. However, Nichiren Shu is really fascinating because it doesn't necessarily criticize other Buddhisms. It actually works together with them, which some smaller schools are against Nichiren Shu because they consider them sellouts in that way. But actually, Nichiren Shonin students and that had worked with other traditions of Buddhism. Nichiren Shonin was a Tendai priest. And even for many years after Nichiren Shonin, many Nichiren Buddhists still studied Tendai, which is considered like the mother of Nichiren Buddhism. And so therefore, it's really fascinating because this misunderstanding about Nichiren Buddhists being, as I said, when I was a monk, the only run-in I had with Nichiren Buddhists was basically them telling me that I didn't understand Buddhism and that, you know, there's the false Buddhism and then there's the real Buddhism. And they kind of play or pretend to be like Nichiren Shonin as if they understand Nichiren Shonin. I'm not Nichiren Shonin, and I don't claim to understand or I speak for Nichiren Shonin. However, Nichiren Shonin's life, he was a very kind, compassionate person, very strong, in which he debated other schools, but he debated priests. That's an interesting thing. And with other practitioners, he was extremely, extremely kind. And it's really fascinating because when you look at Nichiren Shonin, he wrote letters, lots of letters to lay people, and they kept them. And the most especially, which is another important character of Nichiren Shonin, is women, letters to women. One of the big parts of the Lotus Sutra is also the idea of the enlightenment of women. As you can see in a lot of traditions of Buddhism, women are not allowed to do a lot of things. There are even some mountains in Japan, you know, women cannot climb, right? So this was a challenge. So Nichiren Buddhism inspired women and all people, especially those even in economic hardship, etc., to come up under the guise of the Lotus Sutra and Namu Myoho Renge Kyo and change their lives through practice and faith. So these basic tenets, there's so much misunderstanding that in saying Nichiren Shu, there's such a variety, which is what I enjoy about it, because when you study, as I was saying, each part, each tradition holds an important aspect of Nichiren Shonin's teaching and character. And I really love to see how they come together in the form of the Federation Nichiren Shu, which is important that to understand that Nichiren Shu headquarters is in Tokyo at Ikegami Temple. That is the administrative headquarters. But our spiritual headquarters is at Mount Minobu in Yamanashi Prefecture in Japan, where Nichiren Shonin is buried. So that is very important to understand Nichiren Shu as the kind of, I think of it as the historical tradition based on very basic truths with that Nichiren Shonin was very specific about. And those traditional sects came together. Now there are, as I said, many differences, but they work together within the tradition.